Good morning. My name is Vivian Allen and I'm your service leader today. Later, we'll be having a talk from visiting Unitarian minister, Ron Ahnen. Welcome to you, old friends, and you, young and old. You are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, we're stronger because you are with us. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities and genders. We're all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are, you're welcome here. And after our service, please stay for a cup of tea or coffee. It's our sacrament of hospitality. The opening words today are from Bruce Marshall. Our lives are made up of small moments, sharing a meal with friends or family, wondering about a question that puzzles us, giving help to another, listening to a person or being listened to, talking with another about something that makes us sad, an embrace, a smile, a touch, offering a thought that might help just a little to make more sense of it all. Our gathering here is just such a small moment. It's a small thing we do in gathering, yet it is significant. May we affirm and celebrate the moments that we share here today. Now, can I ask somebody to light the chalice? Okay, thanks, Anton. The words for the chalice lighting come from Penny Hackett-Evans. As others before us have sought to make ordinary time special by lighting a candle, we now seek to transform this ordinary time into a special and sacred one by lighting the flaming chalice, a symbol of our faith. Now, if we say together the covenant. Love is the doctrine of the Church. Quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. Dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. I'm going to read a reading from the Reverend Dr. Sandra Fees that Ron sent me. Here's where Unitarian Universalists sometimes get off track. Sometimes mistake the focus on listening to self with a fierce individualism and independence. The worth and dignity of every person, every self, sometimes gets used to prioritise one individual without an equal concern for relationships and community. But listening to self actually turns out to be inseparable from listening to others. Just as honouring each person's worth and dignity is inseparable from honouring the interconnection of all people, so the attentiveness to the self is inextricably related to attentiveness to the other, to a greater wholeness. As Dag Hammarskjöld says, the more faithfully you listen to the voice within you, the better you will hear what is sounding outside. The ancient Hindu philosophy of Vedanta offers an interesting and helpful perspective. The Vedanta philosophy includes two interrelated concepts of self. One is the individual self, the other is the universal self. That individual self is our memories, desires, emotions, thoughts, and experiences. The universal self is an awareness of belonging not to one's own body and mind. It doesn't see the universe as different from oneself. Instead, this universal self is unchanging, a consciousness which underlies everything. So the universal self identifies itself with everything in the universe. Ultimately, deep listening connects to the spirit in all, in us, in each other, in the universe, in other beings. We are called to be faithful to our inner lives so that we can be faithful to the outer world as well. I'm now going to read a short meditation, so do get comfortable in your seat. Close your eyes. I'm going to read a short meditation. We'll have a couple of minutes silence, and then Frank will wake us up again with some nice soft music. The meditation is by Harold Babcock. Let us be quiet, without and within. Let the stillness be in us. Let the silence hold us. May we find the deep places of the soul and begin to let go of the distractions which plague us. May we let go of irritation, calm the confusion which inhibits us, let go of fear. The quiet is within us. The stillness is in us. The silence will hold us. There are deep places in the soul. Here may we find peace. Thank you, friend. Now, what we've all been waiting for, we're going to have a talk by Ahnen called Listening to Your Own Truth. Ron serves as the intern minister at the First Unitarian Church of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and is completing his Master's in Divinity for the ministry. He's also a professor of politics in San Francisco, where he teaches courses on human rights, just war theory, and the politics of imprisonment, among other things. In a couple of years, he's looking forward to retiring from teaching to take up ministry work in a UU congregation. In this sermon, Ron, at the moment, I've written something wrong, reflects on the nature of truth and how we find especially our own personal truth. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Viv, and good morning, everyone. I just want to say that I came to New Zealand to pick up my son from studying from a semester abroad and to do 2 weeks of vacation. And I am just delighted and surprised to be here, but I think it says a lot about you and how welcoming you are. When I came 2 weeks ago and just happened to mention that I also happen to be an intern minister, and to receive this invitation to speak with you today, and I can't tell you just how happy and how delighted I am. Truth. What's the truth? Can you handle the truth? I want the truth. You know, as you all know, we just finished an election in the United States with many different candidates, not just presidential ones, putting forth many claims about what the truth is. And the good news is we've got a lot of journalists and fact finders to help us sort out exactly what is and is not true. And you might think it's pretty easy to find out the truth because, heck, you can Google anything in about a nanosecond. But it turns out that finding out the truth is not that easy. In fact, it can be very hard. However, my sermon, while focused on truth this morning, is not focused on the U.S. election. And I can already see some relief among the faces here. Instead, I'm going to focus on our search for truth as part of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. We have that as part of our UUA bylaws in our recent Article 2 reform, where it says, "We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning." Truth is indeed foundational as we explore how to live out our lives, both as individuals and as a community. So how do we find the truth? Well, that's a key question, but before we get there, we also have to admit that truth itself is actually kind of a complicated beast. It turns out that there are different kinds of truth, and that how we find truth depends on what kind of truth we're after. Let's start with observable truths, or what academics like to call empirical truths. These truths result from widespread agreement among most rational people about what we can observe, like the sky is blue, the earth is round, it orbits the sun. In New Zealand, there are 4.6 sheep for every inhabitant. Yes, I looked that one up. By the way, since the last time I was here, I took a little tour of the Southern Island, and I think I saw most of those sheep. These are objective truths, meaning that one's opinion about them really doesn't matter to their truth value. So you can claim to be a flat earther if you like, but the round earth is going to still continue to orbit the sun. Now, we might think that all truth is like that, fixed and objective. But there are other forms of truth that are also important to us that actually have a level of subjectivity in them. For example, we have religious truth. Now, as UUs, we're all aware that there's a lot of different religious perspectives, as we lean into so many of them. We are a multi-religious faith. Religious truths help us understand the meaning and the purpose that we give to our lives. And they instruct us on how to live and act towards one another. These truths are based on the traditions and the practices of our ancestors that passed on these truths to us. Now, which religious truths you embrace, however, is really up to you. So there is a level of subjectivity that enters in. And a lot of times we might think that religious truths are also fixed and immutable, like observable truths. But traditions, people in various religious traditions are in a constant conversation with each other about how to adapt and how to reinterpret their own religious traditions, just as we UUs did when we reformed our Article 2. The stories and myths of these different religions, of how we came to be and what sacred text we should read and how we are to live, seem to contradict one another. But once we dig deeper, we find that these different religious traditions begin to point in the same direction of some certain values, including respect, generosity, forgiveness, peace, and love. One way to think of these deeper values is to think about moral truth, kind of a third type of truth. Moral truths are the principles and the values that we hold that point to what we consider to be the good, or what we consider to be correct or right action. And moral truths can vary from person to person, from community to community, and can vary also over time. Which version of the good do you espouse? What does your community accept as the appropriate way to act? So moral truths also have a level of subjectivity to them. In fact, the only way that we can live in a country with different religious truths is because at some level we do agree on a certain decency, human decency, of acting towards one another. Yes, we do have different moral visions in the same country, but we also, most of us, believe together in human well-being and flourishing. So we find that religious truths and moral truths also have a level of subjectivity to them. But there's one set of truths that are almost completely subjective, and those are our personal truths. How do I see myself as a person, as a friend, as a family member? What is my race and ethnicity, and what importance does that have to my identity? What is my sexual orientation or my gender identity? What do I believe about God, about what will happen to me after I die, or about how I want to spend my life and resources? No one can decide these questions for you. You have to answer them for yourself. So the personal nature of these truths causes us to focus inward. For example, what's your personal truth on this question? What is the most authentic New Zealand symbol? Is it the silver fern or is it the kiwi? I've been trying to figure that out for 2 weeks. So we have these different kinds of truths. We have empirical truths, religious truths, moral truth, and personal truth. And they have different levels of subjectivity to them, which leads me to 2 observations. First of all, even though they're different kinds, they are connected. Our personal truths, for example, inform our moral truths, the principles that we want accepted by the entire community. Objective facts about human psychology, mental health, or physical well-being can help to also inform our moral truths about how to provide health care or housing or education. Our personal truths can guide us in deciding our religious practices that give meaning to our lives. And our religious truths and practices can also help us develop our moral and personal truth. But the second observation is that we can get ourselves into trouble when we confuse these different kinds of truths with one another. Some people, such as Christian nationalists in the United States, for example, would like to see their interpretation of religious practices mandated for all citizens, squelching the long history of religious freedom that we have in the American tradition. So mistaking religious truth for moral truth has really led humanity through a long, sad history of suffering, including wars, genocide, colonialism, inquisitions, and oppression. So in arriving at considering the truth, we need to be aware of when and how truth is subjective so that we can avoid imposing our own personal views onto someone else. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we find the truth? Well, for empirical truths, we use observation and reason, basically the scientific method. For religious and moral truths, we need to somehow come together as a community and decide those in some sort of social fashion. Sometimes it's done democratically, sometimes church or political leaders decide these for us, or at least they try to. But I think the most interesting of finding truth is focusing on how we find our personal truth, and that's going to be the focus of the rest of my sermon this morning. How do you discover who you truly are? One way to think about this is by thinking about listening to yourself. And not just listening, but what I'm going to call deep listening. Sometimes people use this term, deep listening, and maybe you're wondering, what is this thing and how does it differ from just regular listening? Our general experience of listening, of course, is not to ourselves, it's to other people. So when we listen deeply to others, what are we doing? We're introducing specific skills in order to pay attention more closely to the person that we're listening to. We suspend judgment. We avoid assumptions about what they're saying. We might hold back from asking questions and just let them talk. And we might seek clarification instead of trying to figure out what it is we want to say next. These are all really good, deep listening skills. So, how can we apply these skills to ourselves? Well, some of us might do some deep listening to ourselves by talking to ourselves out loud. And I'll admit, I am one of those kind of people. I talk to myself all the time when I'm by myself in the kitchen or cleaning the bathroom, or yes, I even sing in the shower. But most of what we're doing is, as the song that we sang said, finding that stillness. It's through critical reflection. And we might do that after we listen to a piece of music, or we read a book, or we had a really heart-to-heart talk with somebody. And then we reflect, and then we think on what really makes us whole, what really resonates with us, what makes sense. We also listen to ourselves by paying attention not just to our mind, but also our body. We zero in on what gives us energy and health and pleasure and satisfaction. Listening to ourselves then includes listening both to our minds and our bodies. And I think all of us here have already had this type of experience of deep listening to ourselves, although we might express it differently. Some people might call this searching for personal truth listening to God. Others might say listening to the spirit of life. Others attuning oneself to the energy of the cosmos. Some people might think of it as having an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. Others might call it listening to their inner voice or their conscience. And then listening to our body, we listen to our body when we do physical activities, everything from exercise to dance to yoga to having physical encounters with others. And then we reflect on those experiences and decide which ones really lead us to wholeness. But no matter how we understand that process, we know that it takes deep listening. That is, for ourselves, we have to suspend judgment of ourselves. We have to throw out our old assumptions. We have to slow down and carefully listen to both our mind and body. And most importantly, we need to open ourselves to new possibilities. Some of us find our personal truths early on in life and just continue to follow them. Others take a long time. I have an uncle, for example, who at the age of 48, after 2 marriages and a third relationship with a woman, finally decided and declared publicly that he is a gay man. Coming to that truth was a long and arduous process, and he had to suspend judgment of himself to get there. I was brought up Catholic, and I always had an image of God as an old man with a long beard living in the sky. And more importantly, that God was out to reward me for being good and especially punish me for being bad. And that was my personal truth. But after many years of critical reflection, I became a religious humanist, and I no longer relate to a divine spirit in that way. So I had to let go of my old notion of God, which was a very long and hard journey. And it could really only happen after I suspended judgment of myself and carefully considered options for my religious belief. I think one of the most interesting things about Unitarian Universalists is that a majority of us have also done this. A majority of us have not been raised UUs. And through that process of deep listening to ourselves, we find ourselves gathered here together this morning. Of course, that doesn't leave those of you who were raised UUs off the hook, because at some point you also have to go through the process of deciding whether or not your UU heritage is really serving you to help you find meaning and truth in your life. And yet, as our reading said this morning, we can't just focus on ourselves in finding our personal truth. Deep listening for truth requires us not only to listen to ourselves, but to each other. In the Hindu tradition of Vedanta, we are not just our individual selves, we are also ourselves in the universe, in our community. I happen to be a white, cisgendered male, and I know that systems of bias and oppression in our society have facilitated my chances at life. Maybe I might think that I've gotten this far in life because of all of my hard work, but when I listen to others telling their truth, then I can see how racism and sexism, homophobia, classism, and ableism have still prevalent in our society, have made their lives harder and my life easier. So part of deep listening for personal truth has to incorporate also listening to the personal truths of others and to have enough humility to accept their truth as well. And when I do, then I can incorporate that into my personal truth. And I can be motivated to dismantle systems of oppression wherever we find them. So, deep listening for truth, especially for personal truth, is a long and arduous, resource-hungry process. It takes effort, it takes time, it takes humility. A friend of mine used to have a tagline on his email that said that many people pass up a good opportunity because it comes dressed in blue jeans and it looks like hard work. And I would say that's exactly the case here. Discovering personal truth is a lot of hard work, but it's also a great opportunity because it comes with a huge payoff, and that payoff is liberation. Along with all those taglines I started my talk out with this morning, we can add another one, and that is that the truth will set you free. When we arrive at our personal truth, we experience our innermost authentic selves. And having discovered who we are at our core, our heart is in a holy place. And when it is, we can finally live our lives as the authentic people that we are, and we can be authentically loved by others. To love and to be loved as our truest, authentic selves, to me, is the greatest joy in this life. May we find the strength that we need along our whole life journey to search out our personal truth by listening to ourselves and to others. Amen.
We extinguish this chalice, but we extinguish this flame, but not the flame of the community or fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you. I forgot to mention that Ron changed his flight just so he could speak to us today. And I hope you'll come back for another holiday in New Zealand. My closing words are from Mark Moshe de Wolf. In our lives, may we know the holy meaning, the mystery that breaks in at every moment. May we live at peace with our world and at peace with ourselves. And may the love of truth guide us in our everyday. And thanks to everybody who made this today happen. Alex in Wellington, Tess, thank you.